Good morning. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. I'm going to talk to you about how to raise a narcissist. Now, of course, none of us want to raise a narcissist. However, it's amazing how many of us do without realizing that what we're doing. So I want to review quickly our vision statement because at each level of development, we're going to choose behaviors that continue to bring these qualities to our children and to help them develop these qualities. Our vision is that our children will develop and embody the mental and spiritual well-being and appreciate the value of hard work and education, and demonstrate responsible and respectful interaction with others. So what I'm going to share with you today will illuminate these qualities at the age of 3 to 4 or 3 to 5. And remember, these ages are fluid, so they're not exact. You'll judge with your own child. And at this point, I want to remind you that the parents are the primary teachers of your children, both by what you consciously select and decide to teach them, but also by how you teach them with your behavior. So again, when we look at the vision statement, we want to have qualities there that the parents are also willing to live up to. So to start with, let me explain to you what happens with a 3-year-old. They begin to develop their ego. And I'm going to explain that word because it's one of those psychological words that has been batted around for years. In many circles has lost its meaning completely. Ego in Latin means I am. And so what this child at this point is doing is he or she is separating from their parents. It's like a physical and emotional separation. They know that they are separate from their mother and their father and the other adults that they know. In doing this, they begin to develop their own mindset, what they want to do, what they think, what they don't want, what they won't do. And so they're practicing the skills that are extremely important for them as they grow. So you will notice that some of their favorite words are I and me and mine. They like to say, I want to do it. Don't help me. I want to do it. So they're really trying to become an individual. And this is the beginning. And the seeds we plant at this time and nurture are the ones that are going to develop into the kind of adult we want to have. Because the ego is the conscious part of our psyche, they will tell you what they see and what they hear and what they want to do. They will figure out ways to trick you and to play games with you. And it's such a fun age. Part of this, though, is they are completely focused on themselves. They're so important. They're the most important person in the world. And it's so important for them to know this and to believe this because they're establishing a strong ego. And it's really important that it be strong. So let's look at some of the diagnostic criteria for a narcissist. First of all, let me be clear. We do not have a diagnosis of narcissism for children. And narcissism is one of those things that can be on a continuum that can start for somebody who's just full of themselves to a sociopath. So it's a long continuum. But there are some significant criteria that you will see in a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old and maybe a 5-year-old that are normal at their age. They feel like they're the most important person in the world, and they think they should always be first. They want a lot of attention, and they start performing. They will do anything to get and hold your attention, and they really, really like it when you pay attention to them. They will think up games to play with you. They don't always have very good relationships at this time. They're not so relational with other children. It's hard for them to share toys. They may want to take a toy from another child. They want everything is for me, that's mine. And they don't really care too much about how other people feel. So if they have younger siblings, they may push them or shove them or hit them with a toy or take toys away from them and make them cry. And when we see this behavior as parents, sometimes parents think, I'm raising a monster. Where did this kid come from? They can be very selfish. And I think it's so important that we understand that this is an important role. And as we've talked about before, at this point, they are not very well in control of their emotions. So they get very emotional and they will have a temper tantrum if you put their socks on and they want to put them on, or they want to put their shoes on the wrong feet and you want to put them on the right feet. They may have a total meltdown. But these are all normal behaviors for them. So they're learning and they're developing. So how can a parent help with this? Well, another kind of rule of psychology and therapy that I just think we can never forget. It's so important, and that is the word balance. We have to help them find balance. When is it okay to not share your toys? When do you need to share your toys? What happens when somebody takes a toy from you or your things are not going your way? Do you have to have a tantrum? Do you have to scream and yell and throw yourself on the floor? Or might there be another way to handle this? So we become probably their source of reason. And I like at this time, I think timeouts are wonderful. But remember again, we never punish a child because punishment does not change behavior. Consequences change behavior, and education changes behavior. So when they're in timeout, they shouldn't be in there for very long. I think a rule of thumb is a minute per year, 2 minutes. 3 minutes is a long time for a 3-year-old. But a timeout without a conference is useless. Well, it might have some value. It separates them from the situation, but it doesn't prepare them for when that situation happens again. Another thing you will know about this age is they ask a lot of questions, and their questions are so, what's the word? They just ask so many questions that sometimes parents get annoyed and just, will you be quiet? But when we go to a timeout, this is a good time for parents to answer and ask questions. And what you do at that time is you review what just happened and ask what would be another way to do it. There's a good chance they're not going to have any idea. They're just going to tell you again how they were abused and why they wanted their way. So it's time for a parent to tell them what they think their feeling was. Don't ask the child at this age their feelings because they don't know those words. So we have to give them to them. It seems like you were afraid you weren't going to get your toy back. It seems like you thought maybe that person wasn't going to give you your toy. Or you wanted to put your socks on, and when I put them on, you got very angry. Or you wanted to wear your shoes on different feet, but I wanted you to wear them on these feet. I wonder what would happen if you put them on the other feet. Let them try it. Let them try to walk in their shoes when they're on the wrong feet, even to get their shoes on. Sometimes they can't get them on the right feet at this age. One of the things you want to learn with your child at this age is you let them make choices. And unless those choices are dangerous, you let them go with their choice. That's another rule that you're going to come across when they're 16. This age is very similar to a 16-year-old who is separating again. You want to ask them what would be another way, or I felt that way one time, and maybe give an example and say, and what I did was this. I wonder if that would work for you. And so what you're doing is you're teaching the child to address the problem and you give them a feeling word. I was afraid. I was afraid when somebody took my thing that they were never going to give it back, and I wanted it. So what I learned is that they'll give it back, and maybe if I ask them nice, or, we give them ideas of how it would be different. And then we give them a hug. We give them that comfort and the reassurance that they're loved and they're good, and we send them back to the activity. I think what happens at this time often is that parents get angry or get upset because of the noise and the throwing stuff and the tantrum, that they enter into the tantrum. And this is a time when you want to remember balance. Don't you get out of balance and get too extreme. You don't want to tell the children that he or she is a bad person. That's not going to help. You relate to their feelings, and then you give them advice of maybe suggestions. You could do this or this. Which one do you think would work? What will happen if you handle these timeouts in that way? Your child will eventually look forward to them, because they understand that when they talk it out and they think it out and you're supporting them, that it just works so well. But this is a time that you don't want to punish them. You don't want to put them in the corner as a punishment. You don't want to make them feel like they're a bad person. Now, these same behaviors when they're 30, and I see them in marriage therapy, they're not good behaviors. And this is the age when you want to help a child know how not to have a tantrum. Because if you don't do it now, if you don't plant that seed now, it's going to be very hard to do when they're 16. And if they get out of your home and they become an adult, you're going to have an adult you're not going to like very much, because they're still going to whine and they're still going to cry and they're still going to have tantrums, and those tantrums can become very vindictive and even dangerous. That's one thing we need to know, need to do with them, is to help them understand their feelings and reason out a better behavior or a proper behavior. And this is going to make your child meet our vision of being independent and self-sufficient, that they can take care of it themselves and you won't have to do it. Another thing is they really need attention. Some of the things they do are so cute and so wonderful that you just almost can't keep your hands off of them. They're just so wonderful and cute because they do really fun things for attention. But this, again, can become excessive because they may want attention when it's not their turn for attention. And we've met adults like that, which can be extremely annoying. For instance, if they get invited to a birthday party or something is happening, maybe a younger sibling has some kind of getting attention, they may get angry about that they don't want that sibling to have attention, and that might give them a temper tantrum. So what do? Do we make sure that they get as much attention as they want all the time? I don't think that's a good plan. And the reason for that, it's not going to follow through to adulthood. So what we explain to them is it's not your time right now. It's your sister's time. It's her second birthday or her first birthday, and she's getting presents, and you're not. And that's okay, because your turn will come, but it's not now. I'm not one who's in favor of when it's one child's birthday that all the kids get a present, because I don't think that's realistic. I think what's realistic is that sometimes somebody else is getting all the attention, and I join in and give them attention as well. I don't act out to get the attention on myself. I don't try to do a one-upmanship so that I can get the attention and steal the attention from somebody else. When we're singing happy birthday to my younger brother is not a really good time for me to have a tantrum and take the attention away from that child and get the attention for myself. This is a time when I think there's some roots of empathy in here. How can you set yourself aside and turn the attention to the other person? And how can you do it in such a way that it will give you joy? And I think if a parent is aware of this, that instead of buying an equal gift for the 3 or 4-year-old, if they say, how about let's make a gift from you? And we'll make it so nice that when the person whose birthday it is sees it, they will have joy, and then the 3 or 4-year-old can feel joy with them. I think giving in to a child and making them always the point of attention, I don't think that's good for them. And it can really get out of hand as they get older. 3 and 4-year-olds don't have really good intersocial skills. And this is important because many of them are going to start school in a year or 2. This is one of the times when I have said before that it's the parent's job to teach social skills to their child. It's not the teacher's job. So you want to help that child interact with these kinds of situations so that they learn to build strong and good relationships. They don't necessarily interact a lot maybe until they're like 5 years old, but they do need to learn how to interact with other children. They need to know how to play nice, no hitting, no throwing, no having temper tantrums. Big boys and big girls don't do that. That's what babies do. But big kids don't do that. So you tell them what to do instead. Don't say, stop acting like that. Tell them how to act. Tell them what to say so that they can try that on. And you will also see them when they're playing, if you kind of sneak up on them like I always did. You will hear them using your words when interacting with others. And if those words are something you're proud of, then you're going to feel really good. However, you're also going to hear them say things you're not proud of that come from you. And that gives you a little hint about maybe what you want to focus on in your behavior. Remember, I've said this before, if you're not living the vision statement, don't expect your children to, because they're going to live in the environment that you create. When I talk about narcissism, I'm not talking about sociopathy or psychopathy. I'm talking about just behaviors that are normal in children. Now, if your child grows to be an adult and they're still having these temper tantrums, they can cause real harm, and it can be very dangerous. So you want to have your child know some people that don't get through these stages all right may not swing and throw and punch, but they might do mean and nasty things in a passive-aggressive way where they hurt somebody, but nobody knows who does it. If you see this in your child, which you may, correct it. Say, we don't do that. And show them the proper way to handle their jealousies or their feelings. There's something else I want to touch on, and that is something that had presented itself more than once in my practice when I was doing family therapy. And that is, I would have parents come in with a child under the age of 10 who is completely unruly. They couldn't follow rules, weren't interested in following rules, were caught fighting at school, maybe even suspended. And I'm thinking, how can a 7-year-old be suspended from school? That just baffled me. And when I started talking with several of them, I found that they had been in therapy before, and they had been in what they called gentle parenting. And I asked them to explain that to me. I remember especially one family who said, well, our previous therapist said we should never say no to our child because it will hurt her self-esteem. And I thought, oh my gosh, you never say no about it? No, we never say no. And this child, this little girl, had been suspended from school. And I thought, whoa, what is this? And I've heard this more than once. So I decided that I needed to look up what this gentle parenting is. I was very surprised to see how distorted some people understand it. Now, I'm not a student of gentle parenting, but as I read it, I realized that it's based on a psychologist called Alfred Adler. And his psychology was that you never punish a child, that you teach a child, that you teach a child that for every action, there's a consequence. Now, some things we do, we get a good consequence, and some things we do, we get a bad consequence. The way I think these parents were misinterpreting gentle parenting is that they just didn't let their children take the consequence. Now, sometimes parents create the consequence. If you do this, this is going to happen. And then they will do it to see if that really will happen. If the consequence is there and the child starts to cry and is just very sad and I don't want to do that or I don't want that to happen, and the parents say, okay, we'll promise you won't do that again. That's not gentle parenting. I don't even know what to call that, but you're not going to be successful. Your child has to feel the consequences of their behavior unless the consequences are going to really hurt the child or be life-threatening. For instance, you cannot play in the road because if you do, you may get hit by a car. You don't say, okay, play in the road, and if you get hit by a car, that's a natural consequence. That's stupidity, and nothing about positive parenting is stupid. What you teach the child is that you cannot play in the road. And if I see you going in the road with your tricycle, the consequence is you can't ride your tricycle for the rest of the day. And that's a long time to a little kid. If you want to ride your tricycle, you have to ride it here. If you want to ride your bicycle, you have to ride it here. If you want to ride your bicycle and go across the street, you have to let me or an adult know so they can cross the street with you with your bike, and then you can be across the street to visit your friend. And if you don't do that, the consequence is that you can't ride your bike because you're not being responsible. That's going to translate very well to a 16-year-old. You cannot take the car and ride around with friends. And if I find you do, you can't use the car for a certain amount of time. What you're doing now is you're teaching your child so that you don't have to do it again when they're 16. It's just a reminder. You'll say, you know what's going to happen, don't you? If you ride around with friends when you've been told not to. Then they know. Yep, I know. You'll take the car away. Yep, I will. And so when you have a parent who does not want to see through the consequences with the child, it's because they don't want to take the time. It's very lazy parenting. And some people feel like if I do something and it makes my child feel bad, I'm not a good parent, and I want my child to feel good all the time. That's the most unrealistic form of parenting. Nobody feels good all the time. And here's something else that is very important to know for yourself as well as your child. If you don't feel bad, you'd never change. So when somebody hurts you as an adult and you say, I'm just going to pretend that it didn't happen, then that person is never going to change. But if you say, you did this to me and this is how I feel, and this is what I'm going to do about it, I'm not going to go there with you anymore, then they either will change their behavior or they won't want anything to do with you. We have to follow through on those consequences. So I want to leave you with this thought. We want, again, to always look at balance. If you give too much attention to your child to the point that it's always about them and they're always having you make them feel good, you buy them things, you buy them everything they want, you do everything they want, you're going to be sorry. That's not going to turn out the individual that you want. And on the other hand, if you give no attention to your child, that's not going to work out either, and you're going to be sorry for that. One of the things that I see often, and it's always bothered me, even when I was a young mom and had my children, is to be in a parking lot like the grocery store, and you see the parent walking towards the door, walking quite fast, and a little, even 2 or 3-year-old child running to keep up with them. I just think that's one way you can tell your child, you have no value to me. You have no value. And when a child is developing their ego and they're thinking they're important, and you're telling them by your actions, or I shouldn't say you, but the parent is telling them by their actions that they have no value. When the parent tells them, shut up, if you don't quit crying, I'm going to slap you, or those parents are saying to your child, you have no value. And that child is going to work extra hard to get good attention, to brag about themselves, to try to get people to understand that they do have value. So let's try to keep a fine balance of, you are wonderful. You're the most wonderful person in the world to me, and I love you so much. But it doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want to do. It doesn't mean you can have whatever you want to have. It doesn't mean you need to have more than everybody else. It just means you're going to get your share and you're going to do your share. It also doesn't mean that I don't want to neglect you or ignore you. I want to be your guide. Not your friend all the time, but your guide. I would love to have you join me for my next episode is going to be on how to teach guilt and shame to a child. That's going to be quite interesting because, again, those are 2 words that have been thrown around lightly in so many crazy ways that in many ways they don't mean anything anymore. And we really need those words in our lives. So I would like for you to subscribe and like and give me a comment. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time. Be kind to one another.